Our next speaker this afternoon will be Dr. Ted McCollum. Dr. McCollum is here to speak to the group on rebuilding your cow herd. He is the Extension Beef Cattle Specialist at Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension. He's at the Research and Extension Center in Amarillo. Dr. McCollum has a bachelor's degree in biology from Baylor University, and he has a master's as well as PhD from New Mexico State University. We're glad to have him here with us today. Dr. McCollum.
I'm Ted McCollum again. I'm the Beef Cattle Extension Specialist with Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension Service. I'm based out of Amarillo. I work from the Oklahoma Panhandle down to Colorado City, and from there over to about Weatherford is my territory. So y'all are smack dab in the middle of it. So if you need anything to do with beef cattle production, and that's all the way from forages to anything else, just give me a holler. That's what we're here for. What Rick asked me to try to address today was what are cows worth, or what's their value, because some of you may be looking at wanting to buy some cows, especially with the corn market tanking, and it seems like there's a bunch of guys thinking about this now, some alternative. And I told Rick, and so this presentation may not be what you want, because Rick failed me, because when Rick told me he wants me to get his talk, I said, well, Rick, I'll do it if you'll tell me what calves are going to be worth for the next 10 years. And he's yet to send me the information. So I had to work off my best guess on this. But as we all know, the beef cow inventory in the U.S. lowest has been since the early 1950s. So our cow numbers are way down. Where is beef production in the United States? So total pounds of beef we produce every year. Cow numbers are the lowest they've been since the early 50s. How much beef are we producing? Record levels. We hadn't dropped. So one of the reasons we have fewer cows is because we're still producing as much beef as we ever have with fewer cows. They're bigger, they grow better. We have technology where we can make them big, make the cattle bigger coming out of the feed yards, and we just don't have the demand yet to go ahead and push us up to higher levels and support it. One of the things I'll visit about later is kind of what I call maybe the black or gray swans hanging out here on this whole deal. Is what's actually pushing this cattle market like it is. Now you can sit here and say it's numbers, but somebody give me a guess. Is it numbers of cattle that are coming out of the feed yards that are pushing our beef prices? And I'm talking about beef to the consumer. If you bought any lately, you know it's high. What's pushing those prices higher? Is it the lack of cattle coming out of the feed yards, or is it the lack of cows? It's lack of cows, and you might say, well, it's a lack of cows and they're not producing enough calves to have enough calves coming out of the feed yard. But really, if you look at what's pushing beef prices right now, it's hamburger meat. And where does the majority of our hamburger meat come from in this country? Cull cows and cull bulls. When we pull the plug on those and we drop these numbers down, that's the hamburger market going away. So guess where we're getting hamburger from now? We're grinding up feedlot steers. We're grinding the ends, what we call the ends, the chucks and the rounds off those. We're not grinding up the ribeyes. That's why fed cattle prices are jacked up where they are. That's why feeder cattle prices are jacked up where they are, is the fact that we don't have cows. And it's not necessarily that we don't have cows producing calves. We don't have the cull cows to feed our ground beef market. What percentage of the beef market in the United States trades every day out in commercial and restaurants? How much of it is ground beef? About 55 or 60% is ground beef. That's how big that is. And what's kind of interesting about this, and some of y'all are as old as I am, been around, if we go back 20 years, in the beef industry, we were really concerned about, we can sell the loins and the ribs out of these cattle for a lot of money. We need to figure out how to be able to sell the rounds and the chucks and make some money. So we spent a lot of money trying to figure out how to come up with new cuts out of the round and chuck, that nobody wants to cook a chuck roast anymore. Nobody wants to cook a round roast, and Lord help somebody go to the grocery store and buy a round steak and try, grilling it out on the charcoal, because it'd be tough. So we spent all this time worrying about how can we improve the value of those end meats. We fast forward to today, and guess what? Guess what's driving the market? those end meats, the rounds and the chucks, and it's not that we're making them higher quality, it's we're grinding them up and selling them for hamburger meat to people. So that's what's really pushing this, and the reason I bring that up is one of the things that may affect these prices down the road, and I'll mention it again, is when are we going to start seeing a lot more imports coming in here from other countries to supply that ground beef, which then can put a damper on this. But that's where we are, and a big question going on in the cattle industry is a big question nationally is how much will we rebuild the national cow herd? You know, and you hear a lot of stuff in magazines and everything else about the drought. The drought caused the Plainview plant for Cargill to close down, and the drought caused this, and the drought caused that. Let me ask you something. We started losing our last set of numbers in the cow industry in 1996 is when we started liquidating the last time. Has the United States been in drought since 1996 the whole time? The liquidation has occurred for a lot of other reasons. The drought just happens to be one of the recent reasons that it's occurred. So back to this, people go, well, you know, it's raining. We're going to start rebuilding the cow herd. Well, no, we could restock every cow in the state of New Mexico and every cow in the state of Texas, and it ain't going to make a big difference in where we are on the rebuild. The rebuild at a national level, are we going to rebuild numbers? And this is one thing you need to think about of, are these prices going to hold for a while? Is why did we destock to begin with? Why did we start selling cows in 1996 all over the United States and finally end up where we are today with the lowest numbers since the 1950s? One of those reasons, and let me ask this, anybody know, if we looked at the decline in numbers from 1996 until today, which regions of the United States have lost the greatest percentage of their cow herds? Texas, because we've had drought. Now, if you look, we lost a lot of cows out of the Midwest. Iowa, Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota. Why do we lose cows up there? Land values and commodity prices, exactly right. There's a better use for that land than grazing cows on it. And that was called raising corn and soybeans, especially in the last few years. So, where they may have been grazing cows on grass waterways and in corners or whatever they had up in that part of the world, they've been plowing, at least for the last several years, as much of that into production as they possibly can. And the cows went away. Where's the second area that we lost most of the cows were over in the southeastern United States. Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama. Now, they've had a couple of droughts over there, but they haven't been in drought since 1996 when the numbers started going away. So what happened in that part of the world? Land values and other uses of the land. So a lot of that land has ended up in urban sprawl. Atlanta's expanding, all these cities are expanding, and the cows are going away. The generations of kids that grew up on those places where mom and dad might have had 50 or 100 cows and worked at the textile factory in town or something, those kids have moved to Atlanta, and they're looking out there going, man, I got a piece of land out there worth $15,000 an acre. I think we need to get rid of that. I don't think I'll ever go back out there again. So that land turns. It ends up as somebody's house out in the middle of the country. Or the other thing that's down there is there's a lot of timber that's being harvested and grown down in that area. So that's where we lost a lot of the cows in the U.S., is not in Texas. And so the idea of the drought in the southwestern United States, yes, we lost cows. But the rebuild on the cow herd, are we going to rebuild back to where we were 15 years ago? The answer to that is probably no. Because of the reasons that we lost the cows to begin with. That land went to other uses. And again, if I've got $15,000 acre of land or some of that stuff up in Iowa, corn lands, I hate to even know what the price is of it. You can't afford to run cows on something that you got that much money sunk in. And so we won't rebuild up to that level. But we will restock and rebuild to some level. The other one that's a big problem in the cattle industry, it's probably the same in the crop industry, is the age of the people involved in the cattle industry. it's always been old, 60-something years old. I'm getting there real quick. But we don't have a whole lot of people coming back in. It's not that we don't have people that have a desire to come back in. They don't have the wherewithal to come back in. And so the people we're losing, and that's going to be significant out in this part of the world because of the drought, is there's a lot of folks that were on up in years that they've sold out of the cow business, or they've sold way down. And now they're looking at, do I really want to pay $2,300 for a cow and ride her for 10 years and be 75 or 78 years old when I finally pay her off, if I'm still alive at that time? So they got land sitting out here that they're not going to put cattle back out on. They don't want to. And I bet we could go down here to Lubbock or College Station or up to Canyon, and we can find some young kid that would really love to be out there trying to raise cows and make a living. But how are they going to do it? They can't go to the bank and borrow money. They don't have any collateral. They probably carry a lot of debt to begin with. They just don't have the wherewithal. And so that's one of the big concerns, at least from the cattle side of things. It may be the same way in farming, I don't know, is we're losing people, but we're not recruiting new people in. And part of the reason we can't recruit them in, they just don't have the wherewithal. I think one day we're going to have to get into a system somewhere, some way where we can match these people up that are ready to leave the industry with somebody that's ready to come in, and let the people leaving the industry that may have the financial wherewithal and some savvy to help back those young people coming in to help build that system back up again. But we'll continue along these lines. So nationally, it's how we're going to rebuild the herd. Locally, I think it's more on, are we going to restock what we lost? Not build, we're going to try restocking what we lost. And I guess the question on what is the cow worth, where that comes into play is, when will it occur and how fast is it going to occur? And we're starting to see some indications that we're starting to retain some heifers back, but it's not a huge wave of people retaining heifers back yet. And so I think we will rebuild some numbers, but it's going to be a rather slow, gradual process. It's not going to be something that occurs in the next 2 or 3 years. So that should bode that our prices stay fairly well, fairly good. So the question that came up, what is a beef female worth? I put female up there because we can talk heifers or cows, either one. What's a beef female worth? And I just put this up there. Worth is, the definition of worth is the value of something measured by its qualities or by the esteem in which it is held. If you're a commercial cow producer, you're wanting to know what her value is based on the qualities she has, how well she's going to produce. There are people in the world that they put worth in there based on the other, which is the esteem. Okay. I've got some cows, and they're really pretty cows. And they cost me a whole bunch of money, and I'm not making any money, but they're real pretty and they make me feel good. That's esteem, okay? One of the things, and I'm going to break the rules of being an animal scientist that I'll tell you, is if I'm out buying cows right now, I'm not buying the prettiest, nicest cows out there, because for the next several years, the statement may not be exactly true that a calf is a calf, but it's going to be darn near true. And I can take a near beer cow that I pay a little bit less money for, and I can put her on with a real good bull, and I can probably produce as good a calf, money-wise, return-wise, as somebody that's going to go out here and spend a whole bunch of money for some real pretty cows. So, a few years ago that may not have been the case, but if you're getting into it, we've got the luxury right now. It may take some shopping that you can buy some cows that somebody else may not want exactly or want as bad. Put good bulls with them and be fortunate with the prices we're going to be in for the next several years to build that herd up and build genetics into that herd versus going out and trying to buy genetics right now. So down at the bottom, on the worth, like I said, I just put on there a cow or a heifer can be worth different amounts of money depending on who it is looking at her. And we all have our different opinions on what they'd be worth. Well, current market's one way to look, and this is back from last week of July, Texas summary cow prices. We're down here at the bottom if you want to look at them, but right up here at the top, bred cows, young to age bred cows, we're bringing from $1,500 to $2,300 a head. Pairs, we're bringing $2,100 to almost $3,100 a head. Huge amount of money. There's a lot of people, and you think about this, back to some of these folks that may not want to get back into business, there are some people around that have cows that they bought for $800. Imagine what luxury that might be to cash those things out right now and forget about raising cows for a while. And there's some of that going on. But I guess the question on this one that people come up with, are they really worth that much? You know, is $1,500 to $2,300 undervalued, overvalued, or just right for those cows? Because somebody's making the decision to pay that much money for them. Is it the guy that just wants the esteem of buying that cow, or is it somebody that's really punched the numbers through there instead of the work? So do y'all think those cows are overpriced, underpriced, or just right? All right, I guess you'll have to wait for the answer if you're not going to give me one. Get my opinion on it. Yeah, if you're buying or selling. Well, one way to look at this is to run what we call a net present value. Estimate the value, and the net present value is the value of that cow today based on what her discounted future income will be, discounted for inflation and so forth. So we'll run through some of that, but you know, one of the things that we've got to know and try or need to know, or as I said, guess, as we try to run this analysis, is what's the productive life of the female that you're looking at? Am I looking at a female that I may be able to get 8 calves out of in the future? Or maybe I'm shopping and I'm going to buy that cow that might have 2 left in her that nobody wants, that I can pick up for relatively inexpensive. What will be our estimated weaning weights? What percentage of calves will we wean? What will be the cow salvage value when her productive life's over with? So if you think it's going to be hard to guess what calf prices are 8 years from now, what a cull cow is going to be worth over calving is 8 years from now. What will calf prices be over the life of that cow? And then put in a discount rate, since today's dollar is worth as many dollars tomorrow. So that's the kind of numbers we've got to come up with to run this analysis. We can stick it in, and I can make this available to you. I can find the website for you. But this, what's called cow bid price estimate calculator, where you put all those parameters in, and it will generate net present value for a cow. And give you an idea, based on future numbers, productivity, and income, what she's worth today. In this case, I'll just show you, I'll jump to the end of the numbers in a minute. So again, we put in steer weights and heifer weights. You can see here I put in a 524-pound steer, 509-pound heifer. Cow weight, put in 1,150. In this case, this one example, I said, well, I'm going to give her 3 calving opportunities, or I'm going to try to get 3 calves out of her. So this will be an older cow. And in the way we're going to use this, you just set your cow price at 0. And it'll take the numbers and run it. And you can see that when we do this with these other parameters in here, it's saying, well, this cow is worth $2,930 today, based on what her future productivity would be. Now in this example then, you can see I had 3 calves. And you can see this first year I've got a 98% calf crop. What that was is I'm going to go out and buy me a pair, an old pair, that the cow's bred and she has a calf buyer. So I get to wean that calf this fall. I'm going to lose a couple of them. I'll put on there. But then I'm going to get her rebred next year and have 2 more calves out here. So I've got 3 calves to sell off of her. And then you put in your operating expenses for the cows and so forth. But under those parameters, then it said that cow would be worth nearly $3,000 for what would be maybe a 7 or 8 year old cow with a calf by her side that you might get bred twice more. Would you ever think that an 8 year old cow would be worth that much money? $2,900. But that's how this would work. And so we'll look through some scenarios on here. So the 5 scenarios of weaning rates that I used in here, if I'm dealing with a heifer, something I've got to start out with and breed initially. I'm going to say that first time around we'll wean 92% calf crop. It's not that hard to get them bred. You may lose a few of them, lose a few when you calve them out, but we'll end up with a 92% weaning rate. Second time around, I drop that low. That's typically when people have the worst time rebreeding heifers. That second calf, so I drop that calving rate down to 82%. Then I picked it back up to 84, and where 84 comes from, if you look at the survey data that's been done on ranches in this region of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, The average weaning rate is about 83 or 84%. That may sound low to you, but that's calves weaned per cow exposed. So I put a bull out on 100 cows this year. How many calves that'll wean next year? So you got all your calf loss, and pregnancy slops, slips, and everything else in there. On the cows, if I bought a bred cow, 95% calf crop weaned. First time I had her, it dropped to 84. The remainder of the calves. Once again, we're buying her pregnant, so I dropped it to 95 because every now and then there will be some of those cows that aren't pregnant. You just buy them and you do lose some calves. Then here's the weaning weights, cow weight 1150, and then a discount rate on money out in front of us at 5%. Now the guesswork, other guesswork that comes in is what are the calves going to be worth for the next 10 years? What I used is I started out with $255 a hundredweight as an average price for a 5-weight calf, steer calf this year. And then, so this black line is what I generated for projections for that 5-weight steer calf from now between 2023. And the way I came up with that line was this red line is what's called FAPRI, the Food Animal Policy Research Institute in Missouri, that sets a lot of numbers. They came up with this green line down here that said for the next, and this was back in March that they came up with these numbers. They're probably in Missouri hiding right now based on these projections, but they said that this year a 600-pound steer at Oklahoma City would average just over $1.80. What are those things selling for today? $220, $240, $250, $260. So this red line up here, Stan Beavers, our economist over in Vernon, said this is my projection. So he just took that FAPRI projection and added $75 to it. And so Stan's up here, FAPRI's down here. I went and found what I consider average price for the 500 weight steer calf, put that in there and then use that same trend line they had to generate this black one. So 255 to 257, dropping out here in several years, assuming we rebuild down to about 205 on that calf, and then going back up again later. So that's where my prices came from. Then I looked at these 5 scenarios. I'm going to retain a weaned heifer calf. I'm going to weigh 500 or whatever this fall. I'm going to keep it back. I'm going to develop a breeder and make a cow out of it. Or I could be going out and buying somebody's weaned heifer calves. Developer, carry her through. Or I'll go buy a bred heifer, or I'll go buy a bred cow with 3 calving opportunities. So that'd be that old cow that might have 3 calves left in her. Go buy a bred cow with 5 calving opportunities, or go buy a bred cow with a calf at her side and hope I can get her to calf 3 more times out of that. Okay, just look at those, see what those would be worth. And here's what the numbers come out. So this is net present value for that female in those different scenarios. So if I retain or go out and buy somebody's weaned heifer calf, that little 5-weight this fall, and I develop her and breed her next spring and finally calve her out the following spring and have a calf, what, in 2016 to finally sell off of her. Today, she's worth $1,320 for that 5-weight heifer. What's that 5-weight heifer worth just selling her through the feeder market right now? Somebody know? Somewhere maybe $1,000, $1,100. So if you wanted to live with them for a long time, if you had your heifers and things worked out right, that heifer's actually worth about $200 more than what you could probably sell her for on the feeder market today, if you wanted to live with it that long. Want to buy a bred heifer, calve her out next spring, hopefully get 8 more calves out of her, get 8 calves out of her. She's worth $2,290 right now. Go back to that current market report that I showed you a minute ago. What was the top end on young to aged cows price? $2,300. Here's a bred cow with 3 calving opportunities. That old cow that somebody may not want, you're going to be sitting in the sale barn competing with the packer buyer from Cavendish trying to get her. Okay. If she indeed had 3 calves and you bought her, she's worth $2,000 for that, whatever you want to call her, 7, 8-year-old cow that might have 3 calves left in her. kind of right in the middle of what that range was on that current market report. Grade cow with 5 calves in her, worth a little bit more, almost $2,200. So one of the points on this one to think about, here's an old cow I might build, because this doesn't have anything to do with what I paid for. This is based on what she'll produce in the future, what she's worth today. Which one of these do you think I may have a chance of buying for less money? That old cow with 3 calving opportunities left, or that little bit younger cow with 5? And so if you dollared it out at the end when you bought them, there's probably not a lot of difference between those 2 cows on what's in the end. Because I'll pay less for that one with 3 calves left, I'll pay more for the one with 5. In the end, there's not a lot of difference between them. Or I buy that bred cow with a calf at her side and hope to calve her 3 more times. $3,000. What was the number on pairs that was on that current market report? $3,000. Now again, I didn't set this up based on that current market report. I just ran those numbers I put in here thinking what my parameters would be, and they're coming out close to what the current market report was. So back to the question, are the cows today undervalued, overvalued, or just about right on the current market reports? They're probably just about right. Yeah, we've got some ag economists actually sitting here. How many guys do you think go to the sale barn every day and sit down and run that present value and decide how much what they're going to pay for those cows? Very few. So I don't know how that magic works, that it seems like we almost have, some people must have an innate computer in their head and know how to do this. But, so things aren't necessarily overvalued right now. If all those pricing and production parameters that we put in that spreadsheet turn out to be right. If 5-weight calves stay 250 and drop no lower than 205 out in the front of us. If packer cows stay worth $1 to $1.10. If there's no black swans come swooping in on the industry to wreck things, yeah, those numbers are going to be right. And I think that's the thing that we all got to worry about is, okay, the numbers look right, but how much risk is in there right now? So I don't think the black swan is going to be that we're suddenly going to rebuild the cow herd overnight. You know, if everybody made a concerted effort tomorrow to start rebuilding the cow herd, it'd still be 2 or 3 years before we would ever see the results of that from a production standpoint. It's not going to happen overnight. So there may be some risk that we need to contemplate as we go through here. And the other thing to remember on those net present values is this. Jay, correct me if I'm wrong. That's if you paid that much for today, you'll break even while you own it over time. That's basically right. That's not making money, that's just breaking even. So you've got to work underneath that level if you can, so combine. So what things to contemplate? Market risk. Can we stay at these price levels for the years required to recoup that net present value that was on that sheet? Can we stay up here? What would keep us from staying up here? The economy crashes, consumer demand goes away, international problems, because a lot of what's helping support us right now is export markets. You know, Russia's trying to cut our throats. They cut all our imports off, our exports to them. We got problems over in the Middle East. Something like that could happen. And again, I've become very negative over the last 10 years because you go back to about 1999, you go from 1999 to 2014, it seems like about every 2 years we have one of those moments happens. It didn't happen before, else I would never was paying attention to them before. We haven't really had one here lately. Again, will consumer demand hold up? We're asking you to pay a lot of money for beef right now. A number of years ago, they started asking to pay a lot of money for lobster. How many of y'all eat lobster routinely? I haven't eaten lobster in 15 years. We don't want to become the lobster industry. That maybe one Sunday a year you go somewhere and there's a piece of steak in the middle of your plate. We don't want to become that because of consumer problems. Feed commodity prices are declining. That's helping. It's helping the feed yards a little bit, except for the fact that every time corn goes down, feeder cattle go up. And the best you can do is lock in an $80 head loss on the feedlot steer right now. It doesn't help. What's really going to be a problem though for the cattle industry is who eats most of the corn and soybeans in the United States? And who can I buy for less money at the grocery store? Pigs and chickens. And so the more those commodity prices come down, it helps us in the beef industry because it lowers the cost of gain and it also makes those calves and feeder cattle worth more money. But at the same time, we're giving the advantage or some advantage to the poultry and the pig boys. Now, I mentioned this earlier, ground beef is what's really driving price levels right now. I'll show you some numbers in a minute on price change over the last year. Will that demand hold up? I suspect it will because it's still the cheapest beef you can buy at the grocery store. And again, when we get to these levels, there's a lot of consumers that they don't go in there and want to look at what the price per pound of a piece of meat is. What they look at is what the dollars are on the package. I got $10, what can I buy for $10? And ground beef is still what's fitting in there right now on the beef side. And then the other, will an alternate supply arise? That's what I mean. Brazil's trying to get the doors open and start shipping meat in here. What are they going to ship in? Are they shipping ribeyes? No, they're shipping ground products that are going to get ground. Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, Uruguay, all these countries, we got a supply sitting out there just waiting to get in the door. And if that comes around, then it may not kill our markets, but it will surely soften them because that product is going into the ground beef. It's not going to compete against our steaks. Again, I've been waiting for this thing to correct. This is the live cattle, and some of y'all, anybody in here feed cattle? There's one idiot. So climb up here with me. We'll be the two idiots up in front. You have a feed yard? Me too. You want to commiserate after we've got some beer out to pick up? Whiskey? You read in the magazines, and it's all over. These guys are making $200, $300 a head. On paper, what's happening? Where's most of that $200 or $300 ending up though? It's been in wire transfers and checks going to Chicago. I don't know about you, but the majority of a lot of these cattle feeders, they hedge cattle for 3 years. And so that profitability that we all hear about is not necessarily ending up back here. It's the guy that was willing to take the other side of the hedge on the Chicago deal. But I've been waiting for this thing to correct. It's been acting a little toppy here lately, but it ain't corrected yet. That's live cattle. Feeder cattle, the same way. Just out the roof. And so, again, if you look on this technical stuff, I think there's a whole lot of these technical traders sitting out here with some long positions in these cattle, and every now and then, like the last 2 or 3 weeks, you'll see a dump. I think it's getting high, get a little antsy, let's push the button and dump out of our long positions. But there's still got to be a lot of longs sitting up here. And the day they decide this thing needs to turn around, it could go down really quick, as fast as it's gone up. And these are futures. They don't really have anything to do with cash. They're supposed to be projecting what the cash market would be. But we all know how the world tends to operate is cash tends to follow the futures a lot of the time now, at least in the cattle side of things. So that's one of the things I wonder about. Are we going to be able to stay up here? Are we in for a correction somewhere out in front of us that's going to stay with us? I mentioned this earlier. This is just cow and bull slaughter numbers just to show you. This is year over year, 2014 versus July 27, 2013, just 1 week, 2 years or a year apart. 16% down on cow and bull slaughter. Year to date, we're down 12.3% cow and bull slaughter. That's where all the price is jumping. We don't have the cows. And that's where the ground beef market's taking off. You can see how we've been tracking. That's the 5-year average on cow slaughter. You can see about mid-year last year, we started trailing down below that 5-year average on cow slaughter. We've been tracking down below that for most of this year, and you can see it's really dropped off since the spring. And that's where we've seen where we've gone from, what, $1.30 on fed cattle to $1.60 on fed cattle over that time period, the last 3 or 4 months. And a lot of that's getting pushed by the ground beef market. You can see here, once again, these are beef primal cut and ground beef wholesale prices. Just look over a year ago, so ribs, a high value part of that carcass we think about, the price of ribs has gone up 22% since last year. Nice increase. Let's look down here. The price of 90% lean trimmings, that's what goes into ground beef, gone up 47% in the year. 50% trimmings gone up 36.5%. The rounds have gone up 65% in a year. And those rounds, I don't think everybody started suddenly eating chicken fried steak in the country, okay? Those rounds, that's where they start to get ground up to starts filling that gap on ground beef. But you can see where those cuts, as I said earlier, a lot of this stuff we used to worry about how we're going to sell it at a good price. That's what's driving the market right now, those ends. So market risk, how fast and to what degree will U.S. producers expand their numbers? I think it's going to be slow. We don't know how much they're going to expand. It'll be a slow expansion back out. And part of it's going to be back up in the Midwest and some of these areas where the corn price has deviated some, dropped, and they're going to start pulling some cows back into the system. Got a guy I work with, not up in the Midwest, but up in the North Panhandle, big corn farmer, had a meeting with him a little while ago. They used to run 500 cows anyway. They're going to 1,500 cows. They're taking corn ground out of production, putting it into something else, and they're going to 1,500 cows. There's those examples of that going on everywhere. So we're going to redirect some of this farm ground, and that's where some of those numbers are going to pick up. Will the Mexican producers recover? You get a lot of feeder cattle from Mexico. That helps damper the market, if you want to, a little bit on feeder cattle. They've been real down because Mexico's been in a bad or worse drought than we've been in. Their numbers are really down. And the other thing that may limit that recovery is Sue Carney, who's the Cargill Tyson of Mexico, is expanding their business. They run feedlots with packing plants right next to them. They're expanding their business. So that may keep the numbers of Mexican cattle from growing extremely large and fast coming in. Will imported beef fill the gap? I mentioned that. Will pork or poultry fill the gap on that need? Other things, are your production costs higher or lower than those in the example? If you're a higher cost producer, you better rerun the numbers. You can't pay as much for the cows. Let's skip ahead a minute. The other one is climate risk. What's the future hold? How's that going to influence that decision to invest $2,300 in a cow? So my first question is the current drought over with? Don't know is the best answer. I'm 50-50. I wasn't like, well, I was just past the stage of being a zygote in the 1950s, okay? So I can't remember. But I do know if you go back and look at the records from around, you had drought and we had a pretty nice year right in the middle of it, and then it went right back to where it was. And we sat and listened to a climate forecaster a couple of weeks ago, and he was afraid we're headed that way. That we were bad, 10, 11, 12, 13. We've had this year with some timely rain, and some people have had a lot of rain. But if you look at some of the long terms out in front of us, 12 months, we may be going back to where we were 2 years ago. So the question is the drought over with? And how variable then will the conditions be 5 and 10 years out in front of us when we're trying to pay off that cow? Here's the drought conditions. We certainly have improved a little bit, but the point I like to make, it has been raining, but if you just kind of look at the conglomerate of what it looks like today in the Panhandle versus what it looked like a year ago, not much different. And those of y'all that are out there know that we're basically living from one rain to the next in a lot of cases. Go too long between them, everything starts drying up and turning blue again. So, and if you look at our soil moisture that the USDA will report, I think it's something about 71% of the state is at short to very short topsoil moisture. So yes, we've been getting rain. What we really need is we need a winter to roll in here and put about 40 inches of snow on the ground and let it soak in. Now, you guys that are going to be calving heifers out running steers may not want to hear that, but that's what we need to catch up with. So, short-term climate on production is 12 months out in front of us. Conditions have improved, but we're still short to very short on soil moisture. The chances of El Nino this winter and fall are dwindling. That was the big news, you know, we're going to get an El Nino. So every week that goes by, they're dropping the probability we can have an El Nino come in here. Right now it's down to 65% probability. And part of that is the Pacific Ocean is just so cool overall, it's having a hard time heating up the water that creates the El Nino. We do have a forecast longer term for a wetter and colder fall and winter, and possibly spring. So in the next 8 or 10 months, maybe cooler and wetter. I was talking yesterday, this may be our catch-up here on some of that snow, at least further north. And some models are suggesting that we're going to move back into La Nina or harsher conditions next summer. That's the bad one right there. This is the drought look seasonal, once again, July 17th, October 31st. You know, everybody's stuck right down in here. Drought persists or intensifies, the drought remains, but may improve a little bit. You got to remember that just because it's raining doesn't mean that the drought's going away. The way that NOAA looks at this, they're looking at, do you really change hydrologic conditions with the rainfall? And the reason it says this is going to persist, we just haven't had enough rain to flip those switches yet. This is the El Nino, just to show you what's happened to it. And again, El Nino is where the water along the equator out here in the Pacific heats up. La Nina is where it cools down. When it heats up, it drives moisture up in our area. Here was July the 5th. Notice that red belt right along here? That was what they're saying, El Nino's building, El Nino's coming, we're getting warmer. Here's 15 days later, what happened to the red? Started to go away. Here's August the 4th. What's happening to temperatures in the ocean? They're going down. They're not going up and heating up, they're going down. That's one of the chances of the El Nino keeps dwindling. The water on the equator is not heating up like it's supposed to. So it doesn't look like we can necessarily count on that. So short term, looks like we may have wetter, cooler conditions for the next 8 or 10 months. But there's some suggestions that we may be going back towards a La Nina conditions after that, for the next 12 months. What about on out, a year from now to 10 years from now? I know everybody's sitting there, nobody can predict the weather 10 years from now. But I can show you some people, climatologists, that 8 years ago were telling us it was fixing to happen, and it's happening. So, but our long-term sea surface temperature cycles, these 30 to 50 year duration cycles are still there. They haven't changed. What's happened a little bit, one thing we've benefited and had a little rainfall this summer, a little relief, is we've had just kind of an anomaly this summer in that the Pacific Ocean heated up a little bit. And guess what happened? We had some rain. But those anomalies will happen. The Pacific Ocean is still in a long-term cool cycle. And those maintain a higher likelihood of drier, warmer conditions for the next 5 or 10 years. It doesn't say we're going to be a perpetual drought for the next 5 or 10 years. It's the likelihood of having drier and warmer conditions is higher. Let's get past that. But what we're in today is we've got a warm Atlantic and a cool Pacific. The Pacific cooled down in 2006, the Atlantic cooled down in 1997, or the Atlantic warmed up in 1997. Those are 30 to 50 year cycles. So we're almost about halfway through the Atlantic being hot, and we're in the early stages of the Pacific being cool. So we're going to be stuck in this pattern for a while. And it says in here, drought and drier conditions are more likely to occur. This is where we'd really like to be, is down here, warm Pacific and cool Atlantic. The world's great, but you know, I'll be pushing up daisies by the time that gets around here again. So long-term climate, sea surface temperature cycles maintain a higher likelihood of drier, warmer conditions over the next 5 to 10 years. It doesn't mean we're in perpetual drought. It just means the probability of having a little tougher times is still out in front of us. Once again, how does that fit in with trying to restock with a bunch of cows? How's your risk management for that program? the risk management, like some of these big cattle companies have, is they have said, well, we still got our ranch in Texas, but we also got some property in Oklahoma and Nebraska and somewhere else, so when it gets bad down here, we don't have to sell the cows, we can move them, get them out of here. And I think you'll also see with some of the feed yard capacity we have, after the last 2 or 3 years when we had cows in feed yards, people learned that all the stuff somebody told them that was bad about putting cows in a feed yard weren't true. And so we're going to probably see feed yards as maybe a risk management tool for some of the cow herd, a place to put them in times of tough. So building your numbers back, current cow markets are not out of line with the future projections based on what prices are projected to be, but how good are those projections? How much risk are you willing to take on? So what are the risks? We talked a few on market production risk and how are they going to influence that decision we're fixing to make. So some things to think about. A cow's a sole means of restocking your place. The age-old recommendation is use about 65 or 70% of your capacity with cows and use the other 25 or 30% with cattle you can liquidate easily. Stocker cattle, or maybe that's even some old toothless cows that you pay hardly anything for and you're just running them out there to put some weight on them. So are high-priced cows the way to restock? Again, as I said earlier, there's cows that are not as pretty, not as black, and not as young that can be bought at lower prices. And using good bull genetics on those, we can make good calves out of it. So you don't have to go by the higher prices. So that's my comments. Probably took too long. Any questions, or I'll be around for a while.